Half a day, the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing is now called to order. Today is Monday, October 11th, 2021. The time is 2 p.m. Welcome to everyone connected by Zoom and those tuning in via television or the YouTube channel. Thank you all for your patience and for accommodating this Zoom platform while we maintain social distancing mandates. Notices for this public hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Monday, October 4th, 2021, 5 working days prior, and again on Thursday, October 7th, 2021, a 48-hour notice. The following items will be heard for this afternoon's virtual public hearing. We'll begin first with Bill number 204-36 LS, introduced by Senators Amanda L. Shelton, Telena Cruz Nelson, Tina Rose Muña Barnes, Mary Camacho Torres, Clynton E. Ridgell, James C. Moylan, Joe S. San Agustin, Jose Pedo Terlaje, and Christopher M. Dueñas, an act to add a new Article 16 to Chapter 22, Title 5, Guam Code annotated relative to establishing an opioid recovery trust fund to direct all opioid litigation monies entitled to Guam into such fund, and to establish the Opioid Recovery Advisory Council to be known as the Opioid Prevention and Treatment. General rules of conduct. This Zoom meeting is hosted by my staff and will mute all Zoom participants until called upon by me. Members of the committee and or non-committee members will be allowed to pose a question to an individual testifying. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by me before speaking and may begin by stating their name for record-keeping purposes. When called to speak, please ensure that you are unmuted. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violations of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the virtual public hearing by my staff. Please ensure that your video remains on throughout the hearing. Participants must be visible at all times and not engaged in other activity during the hearing. Failure to maintain visibility may cause your removal from the meeting during the live stream. Now, I'd like to begin by recognizing my colleagues who are in attendance this afternoon: Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Tello Taidagui, Senator Jim Moylan, and Senator Mary Torres. Thank you, colleagues, for joining us this afternoon. And at this time, I'll recognize the primary sponsor of the legislation, Senator Amanda Shelton.
Mr. Chair, buenas hafade, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity, Senator Ridgell, as well as Senator San Agustin, for allowing this bill to be heard this afternoon. And I want to thank our partners who are here with us to provide testimony on the bill, as well as you and our other colleagues who have signed on as co-sponsors to Dueñas. For years, the opioid epidemic has wreaked havoc upon communities across the nation, and according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 70,630 people died from opioid overdose, and 1.6 million people had an opioid use disorder in the United States last year. According to data from Public Health's Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, there were over 97,821 opioid prescriptions dispensed in Guam from 2015 to 2019. A study on the impact of opioids in the U.S. territories published in 2019 cites that the distribution of 10 kinds of opioids in Guam steadily rose from 2006, reaching a peak of 140% increase in 2013. And according to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, this peak in 2013 amounts to 4,372 grams of oxycodone distributed in Guam, equivalent to 2,450 grams per 100,000 individuals. These numbers may be very technical to many of us, but they all tell us one thing, that unfortunately, Guam was not spared from the opioid epidemic. It's here, it's real, and it compels us to act. 2 years ago, Attorney General Camacho joined attorneys general across the country in successfully organizing an extensive multi-jurisdiction lawsuit against companies that have contributed to the epidemic through misrepresentation of the dangers of opioids. Their work has resulted in settlements totaling approximately $26 billion for their roles in the nationwide crisis. Upwards of $10 million of that amount is anticipated to be awarded to Guam. Working together with the Attorney General, I've introduced Bill number 204-36LS, the Opioid Prevention and Treatment Act, with the aim of righting the wrongs opioid misuse has done to our island community. Experts have released reports designed to shape and inform political priorities, and all groups urge elected officials and policymakers to rely on evidence-based interventions to ensure that opioid settlement dollars are spent in ways that bolster the public health response to drug addiction rather than the criminal justice response. The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health recommends, among others, the following: to spend money to save lives through the establishment of a dedicated fund and supplement rather than supplant existing funding, and develop a fair and transparent process for deciding where to spend the funding for determining areas of need, receiving input from groups that touch different parts of the epidemic to develop the plan, ensure that there is representation that reflects the diversity of affected communities when allocating these funds. Many states have already enacted allocation measures to spend their anticipated opioid settlement funds. It's my hope that Guam can join them in being proactive. Specifically, Bill 204 will establish an opioid recovery trust fund to receive all settlement monies obtained through opioid litigation, dedicate the fund for exclusive use in expanding support to opioid prevention, treatment, and recovery programs, and establish an opioid recovery advisory council composed of community partners to strategize spending of monies in the trust fund. Finally, the Attorney General, the Office of the Attorney General, will be designated the single agency to handle opioid litigation. Mr. Chair, these settlement funds are more than just a representation of the debts owed by the pharmaceutical industry to communities nationwide. They can help turn the tide in the opioid epidemic and prevent future harm to Guam's families. Months before these funds are deposited, and with advice from experts who have seen firsthand the effects of opioid abuse on our island, we have an opportunity here to ensure that these funds are spent the way they are intended to be spent. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak on this bill and for this bill to be heard. I look forward to the conversation today and to the recommendations to be made from our community and our stakeholders to strengthen this legislation. So Dios Masi.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. At this time, we'll begin with testimony from those who have signed up to testify, beginning in the order in which they've signed up. So first on the list is Stephanie Mendiola, Deputy Attorney General.
Jesus Mahasi, Acting Chair Ridgell, sponsoring Senator Shelton and other fellow co-sponsors and senators. As mentioned, I am Stephanie Mendiola, General Counsel for the AG's office. I'm here today with Assistant AG Jojo Perez from our Consumer Protection Division, which has been leading the opioid cases for our office and for our community. Just sort of to reiterate, we worked with Senator Shelton's office on Bill 204, and so we're certainly here today to express our support for the measure. We submitted written testimony and are happy to read it into the record, but in short, it just sets up the structure for how we as a community can identify the best use of resources as the money will come in over the next 2 decades. I can clear it. Oh. Okay. Today, Senator Agustin, thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony in support of Bill number 204-36LS, the Opioid Prevention and Treatment Act. While our island's primary drug problem involves the use of crystal methamphetamine, our government agencies, community partners, media reports, and our own life experiences with loved ones and neighbors informs us that the impact of opioid use disorder is on the rise. In most cases, opioid use is combined with the use of meth and/or other substances, thereby exacerbating the problem and increasing the prevalence of co-occurring disorders. In 5 years, from 2015 to 2019, there were over 97,000 opioid prescriptions dispensed in Guam. In approximately 2 years, from 2018 to 2019, Guam Memorial Hospital dispensed nearly 200 doses of naloxone, a medication used to reverse opioid overdoses. Given the ongoing opioid epidemic in the country, this increase, as saddening as it is not surprising. Thousands of lawsuits have been brought across the country against manufacturers, marketers, distributors, and dispensers of opioids. Territory and state attorneys general have organized to litigate or settle these cases across their jurisdictions. In February 2021, Attorney General Levin Titan of Camacho and 47 other attorneys general entered into the first of a series of settlements against management consulting firm McKinsey & Company. Additional settlement agreements and or bankruptcy plans are expected in cases against Purdue Pharma LP, Johnson & Johnson, Cardinal Health, McKesson and AmerisourceBergen, Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals, Teva, and Apotex. These settlement agreements will result in payments amounting to over $20 billion. Is likely to reach approximately $10 million over the next 18 years. All agreements, bankruptcy plans, court judgments, etc., will require that funding awarded to the territories and states be spent for abatement of opioid use and co-occurring disorders. Different jurisdictions are approaching spending in various ways, including advisory councils, direct appropriation to agencies, legislative appropriation by category, etc. But all approaches have in common the involvement by government and community stakeholders and monitor and reporting requirements to ensure compliance with the terms of the settlement agreements. Some spending plans will include distribution of naloxone, medication-assisted treatment, treatment to pregnant and postpartum women, treatment for neonatal abstinence syndrome, treatment for the incarcerated population. Other spending plans include support of transition to and through recovery treatment, including wraparound services for housing, transportation, job placement, training, and childcare. Prevention programs, including education campaigns and drug disposal programs. Spending plans may also include pre-arrest diversion programs, which will help us as a community move away from criminalizing addiction for the exact reason that addiction is not a crime, it is a disorder. Since taking office, it has been AG Camacho's mission to combat crime and improve public safety by focusing on the causes of crime, including substance use disorders, and steering away from the ineffective and unfair approach of trying to incarcerate our way out of addiction. Under his leadership and through his active role in the National Association of Attorneys General, Guam will participate in the largest non-tobacco settlement in recent history. Bill 20436 is a large part of ensuring compliance with settlement agreements and judgments issued in these cases. We look forward to its passage, either in its current or very similar form. Sinceramente, signed Stephanie Mendiola, General Counsel, Deputy Attorney General. Cesar Smasi.
Thank you for that testimony. Will Mr. Perez also be providing testimony too, or is it just yours, Ms. Mendiola?
Just that for our oral testimony, but we're here to answer any questions that the committee or the panel may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, I see here Lillian Posadas from GMH. Are you providing testimony on this?
Hi, good afternoon, Senator. I am providing oral testimony. I didn't have a chance to do a written, but essentially, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for crafting this legislation, which is really very important and it is needed. It's a proactive legislation, so it's great. And I support it. I fully support it. I fully support the intent and the purpose. The only thing that I kind of I was kind of questioning was the $10 million, which is really a great seed money, a great startup money. I just want to make sure that there is some kind of a consistent and regular funding stream, because it is kind of costly, to treat these individuals in the hospital. And so the cost may go up. I'm sure it will go up. So I just want to make sure that we address that, maybe not right now, but in the future, address some kind of a consistent funding stream that will keep this program alive and active and ongoing. And I support the Opioid Recovery Trust Fund. I truly, fully support that, and the council that in terms of the composition. And I like the fact that you are including a member who has experience or a family member with that experience, because that's a very great, that's really a good perspective to have within this advisory council. So again, I support this legislation, and I thank you, legislature, and thank you, Senator Amanda, for taking the lead in authoring this legislation. And I thank the legislature for the support of this bill. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Posadas, for your testimony. Is there anyone else online who is here today to testify on this measure? I don't see anyone else on my list, but if someone else is here to testify, please speak up at this time. I do see other people logged on that don't have their cameras on, so I'm not too sure if you're here to testify or not. If not, I will allow any questions or comments from my colleagues, beginning with Senator Taitegui.
Sijus Masi, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to those who came to testify and to my colleagues. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for your testimony and then for being here. Reading what you have here answered one of the questions, what you put down answered one of the questions with regards to the 10 million and the anticipation of when we're going to receive it, if it's going to be all at once or not. And you have it down for 18 years, approximately 10 million over the next 18 years. Do you know, Stephanie, how much currently right now that will come to Guam's way if the bill should pass, or if what's standing in the wings right now to place into this fund or account?
Sure. Thank you, Senator, for the question. And this is probably where AAG Cruz will step in and help me with some of the details. But to kind of answer your question in reverse order, what we currently have are the funding, are the dollars from the first settlement against McKinsey, and that's around the $230,000 range. That settlement agreement did not require legislation or setting up a trust fund for the funding. So we've already received that, and a few months ago announced our spending plan, which is in line with the guidance and requirements for opioid spending, including things like support to direct service providers, education campaign. And one of the biggest things that we're going to be working on with opioid settlement funding is building the data, which kind of transitions to the next half of the answer. The funding for the settlements and all of the other cases is somewhat data driven based on the impact of opioid use disorder across jurisdictions. Because there wasn't as, I guess, good of data for the territories, they used population. So we're going to use some of the money to try to build the data for our territories. The amount of money that will come will depend on a formula for each of the cases. And so depending on what the total amount is in a particular settlement, Guam will get a certain percentage, and then there will be a large upfront payment followed by additional payments every year over a set number of years. So it sort of goes to what Administrator Posadas was mentioning earlier. There will thankfully be a regular funding stream year over year. There will unfortunately be a more clear drop off. So it's not like tobacco where it's for eternity. But there will at least be a set period of time where we will know that we can set up a program and have funding coming in year over year. Guam's percentage, I think, is about to figure out dollars is like 0.005, something along those lines. So it's going to depend on each case for what the exact amount will be. Would you like to add to?
Yeah, and just to also add as far as how the what's holding up or what obstacles might be in place Right now, part of the settlement in different jurisdictions, there are subdivisions. And so each state has multiple subdivisions. Here on Guam, we don't have necessarily a subdivision that can jurisdictionally survive on its own and pursue a lawsuit. So part of the agreement is to make sure that we have subdivisions involved for the states. There is a critical mass number that is still unknown by the defendants. And once that comes in, they'll let us know that we can move on to the next stage of the process. And so that one, I believe, is ending around the end of next month. And we'll know more towards the end of the year. And we expect, if everything goes smoothly, we expect the first payment to be in April of 2022. But it depends on whether or not the stateside subdivisions, how many get involved in the agreement and how many don't. So hopefully, Senator, that answers the questions.
Pretty much, basically what you're saying now is $230,000 is what you have right now currently, which goes directly to the Office of the Attorney General. And if I'm not mistaken, you're saying that that funding is on spending is guided by guidelines, or there's rules and regs on how to spend it. So it'd be nice if we can get that as part of the committee report to show us what those guidelines are for the 230. Then you mentioned that you have a plan that you're going to be putting into place in order to move forward with the spending of that. However, it really, if I'm not mistaken, the first amount that is anticipated going into this account will be in April of 2022. Is that correct? The first
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, barring any other obstacles.
Right. So not knowing exactly how much is going into that, when the funding does come in, where there'll be a set of guidelines and rules and regulations on how to spend it, or is it the responsibility of this commission that's created in this bill to do so, or this council, advisory council? And will it need legislative approval? Once April comes, the money comes in, the council is put together, it follows the guidelines and rules. Does it still need legislative approval to spend it?
Okay, let me try to answer all those. There will first, no problem. Just please let me know if we missed any of them. First, okay. There are no rules and regulations specifically in place for guiding spending under the different cases. There are terms of the settlement agreement that identify that funding, spending plans have to address abatement of the opioid use disorder and co-occurring disorders within the communities. So there are no rules and regs, but there are restrictions and guidance for spending that are in place in the agreement. The second question for April 2022, or I think I'm missing the second and the third, but whether or not there will need to be additional legislative approval, no, there will not necessarily need to be additional legislative approval for the funding. The way the bill proposes to set up monitoring of the funding so that it is in compliance with the terms of the different settlement agreements, bankruptcy plans, et cetera, is to have the advisory council advise on what the spending plan will be to the Attorney General's office, and then the Attorney General's office will monitor compliance in accordance with the settlement agreements.
Okay, Mr. Chair, just one more question, and I'll wait another round to allow my other colleagues to ask points. The last one I have is just, will the trust fund be subject to any audit by OPA, or will the U.S. Department of Justice be the one to audit the account?
I'm actually not sure who would be responsible specifically for auditing either of the accounts. I assume that if there is a opioid trust fund that's set up within the government, then of course the OPA would be able to do so. But in terms of requirements, if we do not spend the money in accordance with the terms, so if we don't spend the money properly, in other words, then we will lose, going back to the point of getting money over a certain period of years, we will lose our ability to continue to get payments. So it's sort of in concept like a contractual agreement. So we're entering into an agreement to spend the money a certain way, to involve certain players, to have consistent reporting requirements, periodic reporting requirements, and probably even more significant than an audit, we would lose the money in future years. Well, not more significant, but more of a stricter, I suppose, consequence rather. We would lose the money.
And if I may, Senator, too, the part of the agreement also sets up a committee on the settlement side between the states. There, like Stephanie said, there is a reporting requirement. So it's not necessarily an audit, but it is a reporting requirement that if requested, we produce to the committee that's agreeing to the states. And that one's not completely set up yet. And so I'm not too sure how that committee's set up at this current moment, but there is a reporting requirement for this settlement agreement.
Okay, it sounds like that there's no reason why we shouldn't put something in there for the OPA to do an audit, because it's important that we don't lose any kind of funding and that there's no neglect or abuse of this fund. So putting an audit, the OPA to audit this is just another mechanism of safety for the fund and everybody involved, for transparency and accountability, most especially. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just wait for another round in case I have more. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Titlegy. Senator Moylan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions and am in total support of this measure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Senator Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions either, but certainly I think Guam certainly is very fortunate in the efforts of the Attorney General's office to be able to obtain these funds for our community is a very good thing. It's just unfortunate that, we still have many of our people, unfortunately, that are suffering from this type of drug abuse, and certainly anything we can do to do outreach, education, awareness, and treatment, especially for those that need the treatment, will be beneficial. I certainly wish them well in properly managing and addressing the execution of these funds. So with that, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Torres, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions for the panel. I just want to express our appreciation for them bringing this to our attention and, making sure that this legislation was put in place so that we could have better effect with the use of those funds. I just want to make that general comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Torres. All right, I believe Senator Titlegy still has another question. Senator Titlegy, you are recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for indulging me, Mr. Chair, and everyone here. I have another question. Stephanie, is there a funding cap for the administrative cost established in the U.S. Department of Justice? With any policy restricting from establishing this limits either from the legislature?
I'm sorry, did the Department of Justice?
Yeah, just using, how every grant has, or I know it's not a grant, but the award that's given, but in most grants, there's an administrative cost that's given to oversee the account. So is there a cap that was established by the judicial system to Department of Justice?
Just to clarify, so Department of Justice is not involved on these cases. This is all brought by the territories, the states, and then within the states. Why this is such a large issue is because within the states, cities, counties, different municipalities have authority to sue as well. So that's why cases were reaching in the multiples of thousands. So there's this now organized effort to streamline the litigation. So DOJ is not necessarily involved in these particular settlements, but to answer the specific question, I don't believe that there is a dollar amount or a percentage cap on the administrative fees. There are allocations for the administrative fees because, as whether we like it or not, it costs money to give money, so to speak. But again, going back to the parameters of the spending plan, the balancing between the committee and the administrating agency, whichever it may be, depending on the jurisdiction, and the reporting requirements. If that were to get out of hand, that would be like, if the administration costs were not reasonable, that would be caught in the reporting of whether or not you're using the funds appropriately.
Stephanie, you mentioned that this is not under the U.S. Department of Justice that's overseeing this. You mentioned it's under the state. Can you kind of explain?
Sure. The states, the cities, towns, counties, they're the ones that sued these companies. The Department of Justice did not sue these companies.
Okay. Okay, that explains it. And they're represented by all the attorney generals in each of these states and counties. Okay.
Yes. So kind of tying to what Jojo was mentioning earlier, and as well to the section of the bill, the last section of the bill designating OAG as a single agency. So we're fortunate that we don't have to try to balance among multiple subdivisions within Guam. We are just a single subdivision. So we brought suit against these companies just on behalf of Guam. And what that provision allows is that moving forward, the companies, as part of these settlement negotiations, they don't have to worry about whether Guam is going to agree today, and then a subdivision of Guam, like for example, a village or something, is going to try to sue the company 5 years down the road, so to speak, if that makes sense. So all of the different places across the US sued these companies, and then the attorneys generals came together to try to consolidate.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your hard work and looking into this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Senator Titagui. I do have one question. I just wanted to clarify with the AG's office. So if there were an amendment made to the bill to require an audit by the public auditor, are there any concerns that the AG's office might have about that? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Just kidding.
I don't see that we would object to that. It would just sort of be duplicative. If that's a concern, but I understand that if there's concern for the legislature sort of not necessarily being involved as directly in the spending of these funds. But certainly this is something that's going to go on for so many years. So it's and sort of front and center to these efforts to combat this issue in our community. So it's certainly something that the legislature would be able to monitor. So although we would not have opposition to it, we would already have that sort of check and balance built in because of the way the multi-jurisdiction litigations with the settlement agreements are structured. But if I may just add one thing that may not necessarily be happy to legislators' ears, but again, these are just the terms of the agreement as they are. What will limit the legislators' abilities with these fundings across the country is that you wouldn't be able to use this funding to sort of substitute for local government funding. So you couldn't necessarily like reduce Guam Behavioral's budget by, $1 million and then use this funding to provide $1 million to them, so to speak.
Okay, got it.
But no objection to an audit.
Okay. All right, thank you. I have no other questions. Of course, I'm a co-sponsor of the measure, so I support the measure. And with that, if there are no other questions or comments, I'll allow the primary sponsor the opportunity to close on the measure. Senator Shelton?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And if you allow me, I'd like to read into the record the testimony from the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center that was submitted via email. So Hafaday Chairman San Agustin and Senator Shelton, GBHWC unfortunately will not be able to make this afternoon's public hearing, but would like to submit for the record our support for Bill 204. GBHWC and the Attorney General's Office has been working closely all year to realize funding from opioid lawsuits. Today, GBHWC and AG has an MOA in place that provides $114,516 from the McKinsey settlement. This funding will be used to fund 2 additional positions for the residential substance abuse treatment program at DEPCOR and is primarily funded by a grant from the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. As you are aware, GBHWC manages the mental health and substance abuse programs at DOC today. As we hope and anticipate for more funding to be realized by the efforts of Guam's Attorney General Office on similar lawsuits, GBHWC supports the establishment of a set fund account and council that will ensure that settlement funding from these lawsuits are properly dispersed to the right entity, such as GBHWC Drug and Alcohol Program, so we can continue to make positive impact on the ongoing substance abuse pandemic that Guam has been fighting against for over 3 decades. Thank you for your time and attention. I wish you all the best of health always. Stay safe. Kindly acknowledge receipt of this email, but signed Teresa C. Areola. And then, Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank you again for the time today. And I want to thank our partners at the Guam Memorial Hospital and at the Attorney General's Office for their input for today's bill, and of course, their assistance in drafting this legislation. Mr. Chair, I think it was almost a couple of years ago when I first saw in the news that these opioid cases were coming about, and I asked the Attorney General if this was something that Guam was going to be a part of, if we would be receiving any funding. And since then, this has been in the works, and we're really happy to see that these settlements are now coming into Guam, and we're able to support the Attorney General and the efforts of our agencies fighting against drug use in our community, to be able to support them, make them the strongest place possible to do the work in our community, to make our communities healthy, to keep our families together. And I look forward to the continued participation from our community members and our stakeholders, if there's any input to come, and for us to work together to ensure these funds are used properly. Siduos Masi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. There being no additional individuals to present further testimony on this bill, the committee will receive testimony for the next few days for the acceptance of any additional information or public testimony on the bill. You may submit testimony to the mailroom of the Guam Legislature or through email at senatorjoesanagustin@gmail.com. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending this virtual public hearing and for providing feedback and suggestions and comments and questions. The public hearing is now adjourned. The time is 2:38 p.m. Thank you all for attending.
Jesus Mossy, Senators, adjust.